Well, hello there, Old Man Kelly here. On today's show, we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to see how this whole idea of filmmaking began. Do you know who came up with the idea? Let's find out. Our story begins in 1872 with a long-standing debate on whether, when a horse is trotting, if all 4 feet come off the ground at the same time. Leland Stanford was a former governor of California and a businessman and racehorse owner who was living the life as a rich country gentleman. He insisted that yes, at a certain point during a horse's run, all 4 hooves come off the ground at the same time, and he wanted to prove this. Now some say this was over a wager, but from what I've read, Leland Stanford was not the betting kind of guy, so it may have just been a gentleman's bet between him and a few friends. Anyway, to prove it, Leland hired a photographer named Eadweard Muybridge. Muybridge was born in 1830 and by the 1860s had made a name for himself taking pictures of the Old West, especially the Yosemite Valley wilderness. So Stanford asked Muybridge if he could photograph a horse running at high speeds, and the answer was no. Photographic equipment at that time wasn't capable of doing something like capturing a horse running at high speeds, yet Muybridge decided to try. He lined the far side of the racetrack with as many white bed sheets as he could find to reflect as much sunlight as possible, to take an image of the horse as it ran by. His first attempts were all complete failures, but eventually he did manage to take a picture of Stanford's horse, which was named Accident, with all 4 of its feet off the ground. Now the image doesn't exist anymore, and it is said that the image was hard to make out, dark and shadowy. And many said this was not real proof, so Muybridge would have to try again. But that would have to wait. You see, trouble for Muybridge began in 1874. For 2 years, the 42-year-old Muybridge had been married to a 21-year-old named Flora Stone, and now she was having a baby. The problem with that was, soon after the birth, Muybridge suspected the child wasn't his because he learned she was having an affair with another man after finding a letter written by the other man. The third man in this love triangle was a Major Harry Larkins, and in a daze, Muybridge traveled to the man's home and said, "Good evening, Major. My name is Muybridge, and here's the answer to the letter you sent my wife." And with that, he shot him point blank. Now, Muybridge was later acquitted of murder on the grounds of justifiable homicide, but that's another story for another day. Let's just say that it was an all-male jury. Now, after a trip to South America where he shot some amazing photographs, he returned to Stanford and continued his horse experiments. You see, it was Stanford who paid for Muybridge's legal defense. That's how serious Stanford was about proving his point about a racehorse. And Muybridge realized that the best way to prove the point was a series of photographs showing a complete cycle of a horse's gallop. With the help of some engineers that worked at the Central Pacific Railroad, they set up a long shed that ran along the straightaway of a racetrack, and in that shed they had 24 cameras in a row. They invented the first electric shutter for each of the cameras to capture the horses that ran by. They were sort of 2 pieces of metal that had a gap in the middle, and they would drop in front of the lens really quickly. Now a wire stretched across the racetrack, so as the horse went by, they would break the wire and trigger the shutter. When the pictures were developed, Muybridge was thrilled to see all 4 feet of the horse off the ground at the same time. And in the end, Muybridge had 24 pictures that were not too much different from 24 film frames. Yet even with that, there were many who were still not convinced. Many experts didn't believe these images were real, so to prove his point, Muybridge created what he called a zoopraxiscope. A zoopraxiscope had a glass disc with silhouettes of the images painted around a circle, and when it moved through a projector, it gave the illusion of movement. These were not actual photos, they were hand-drawn representations of the photos, and to draw these on the glass was a very time-consuming process, as each one had to be done by hand, and they had to compensate for the distortion of the round piece of glass. When projected on a wall, it looked like the horse was in motion. And after this, capturing the movement of animals and people became Muybridge's passion. He even photographed himself in motion. And when any of these series of pictures were put into sequence, it looked a lot like film. Of course, it really wasn't, because these were a series of photographs all taken with separate cameras, but the idea was there. And over the years, Muybridge would take and publish thousands of photographs, including many nudes, which seemed to indicate that maybe he was drifting away from scientific research and heading into a territory more like erotic imagery or pornography? I don't know. It was Muybridge's work that inspired Thomas Edison in his invention of the motion picture camera. In fact, Edison and Muybridge had met and discussed the idea of the motion picture. And it was Edison's kinescope that inspired the Lumiere brothers, who created a way to show motion pictures onto the screen, thus starting the whole motion picture revolution. Muybridge died in 1904 at the age of 74, but for decades after that, animators would use his pictures to learn how to animate their drawings for the screen. Oh, by the way, I did a podcast on Muybridge over a year ago, and there's a very good documentary on the man available for free on YouTube, which I watched before creating this little film. I'll put links to both of those down below. Thanks for watching.